شام آ گیا، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
زینب کی لو خبر عابد ہے ناتواں،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
دشت بلا کو چھوڑ کر آ کے شفا کو اوڑھ کر، اے فخر کبریا سنو کہتی ہوں ہاتھ جوڑ کر، ایسے چلے گی ماں اے میرے نوجوان،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
قسمت کی پاس باں ہے وہ، خیر النساء کی جاں ہے جو، غربت کی انتہا ہوئی غیروں کے درمیان ہے وہ، شہزادی یہ جناں سہتی ہے سختیاں،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
قاتل تیرا میرے پسر سجاد کا ہے ہم سفر، تم تو نہیں ہے یہ ستم سہتا رہا ہے وہ مگر، ایسے سہے بھلا بیمار سارواں،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
میں نے سنی ہے یہ صدا کہتے ہیں شام میں سبھی، بدلہ علی کا لیں گے ہم بنت علی سے آج ہی، پتھر سے ہے بھری لوگوں کی جھولیاں،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
نامحرموں کی بھیڑ میں اٹھتی نہیں نظر میری، عباس کی قسم نہیں اشنا لبی کا غم کوئی، دکھ ہے یہ میری جان سہمی ہے بیبیاں،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
پالا ہے جس نے عمر بھر اکبر تجھے حجاب میں، غازی کے سامنے بھی وہ بیٹا رہی نقاب میں، غیروں میں بیردا جاتی ہے علماء،
بازار شام آ گیا، اکبر میرے جوان کس کو بلائے وہاں، بازار شام آ گیا۔
موقع سنا کو دیکھ کر یاور یہ کہہ رہی تھی ماں، دیکھ تو بھی نوجوان مادر کا اپنی انتہا، آنکھیں نہ بند کر आसमां।
बाज़ार शाम छा गया अकबर मेरे जवां, किसको बुलाए मां। बाज़ार शाम छा गया, बाज़ार शाम छा गया, बाज़ार शाम छा गया।
زينب تقل للسجاد عمه يا بعد عيني، خلي تساعد على اللوح بالولة وتواسي. زينب تقل للسجاد عمه يا بعد عيني، خلني تساعد على اللوح بالولة وتواسي. أنا أبكي على حالك وانت ابكي على أحبابك يا عمه، بعد هيهات ما يلفون غيابك. نوح بهالمصيبة وياك وابكي وياك المصابة، ما ذيك الحزن والهم وهم العالي ما ذيني. خلي تساعد على النوح نبكي ونهل دمع العين، نتذكر زمان الفات ويا احبابنا الطيبين. عافونا ومشوا عنا مدري وين راحوا وين، غابوا بالحود اهلي ومشوا عن عينك وعيني. هاي الفلك دوراته وهاي الدهر دولابه، واحد فاجد عضيده وذاك يصيح يا يابا. كم واحد هجم بيته وكم واحد يغلق بابه، ترى قلب انفطر بالهم وريدا من يسلي. شحال الفاقد اخوانه وشحال اللي فقد عوده، راحوا عن منازلهم سفروا وما بعد عوده. صاب الدهر بصوابه وهاي الدهر مقصوده، سطرني بعين القلاده وفرق بينه وبين. ابكي لحالة السجاد ما فاجد فقد مثله، احبابش كثر راحوا له طلعت نور عين اهله. صدق يلتي ناشدني عقبهم عيش ما يحلى، يسعدني ليحن وياي بدموعه ويواسيني. لحد يعرج على الطف بيها احباب عفناهم، مشينا باليسر عنهم ضحايا ولا دفناهم. يحد يعرج على الطف بيها احباب يا حادي، عفن اجسادهم نومه ضحايا بحرة الوادي. عزمي ورادت العندي ابكي واقضي مرادي، اقلهم يا نسيتوني من اهلي ليش جبتوني. بين الغرب عفتوني واشي ذلي تعدهم، وكثر عتاب وياهم عدنا عتاب وياهم. اوصل وكثر عتابي واقلهم بالجرع اللي انا مصاب الما جرى مصاب. كنت مدلل بظلهم احباب وراحوا احبابي، فرد ساعة مشوا عني بقيت النايح فني. اقلهم شل عذر مني رجال 17 عدهم نشامة وعيشت بحماهم. يا حادي وعيشت بحماهم عزيزة ولا عرفت الذل، زمان الجال بعادي علي العيد من يجبي. ما حد يسمع لصوتي ولا نسوى علي تدخل، بذاك الخدر موصوفه يوم الجند بالكوفة. شخصي ما حد يشوفه، عمامي وخوتي شقدهم، حماة الجار حياهم، يا حادي وش ذكير الكوفة، عقب ذاك الدلال اللي كان جيت الكربلة ويهلي ضعينة تحطها الخوة. تعلم من الماتم شريده يرجع النسوان، ناموا وطابق بالحومة جفوني ورادوا
التوزيع الشبكي سمير الدبي.
عقبهم صيرت مظلومة، راحوا بعد شيردهم، بعد هيهات ملقاهم، بعد هيهات ملقاهم، يا حادي ولا دريت صار بيهم عقب ما رحنا، عهدنا بيوم مرينا وعلى جسوم الأهل طحنا، نصيح بصوت ما عدهم جواب الصوت لو صحنا، موت ولا دروا بينا عليهم يوم مرينا، والله عليك ودينا لهلنا وجب بحدهم، عزاز وطال فرقهم، عزاز وطال فرق.
ہائے کڑیل جوان اکبر، میرا کڑیل جوان اکبر، ہائے کڑیل جوان اکبر، میرا کڑیل جوان اکبر.
جیتی ہے وہ ماں جس کے گزر جانے کے دن تھے، اور جیتی ہے وہ ماں جس کے گزر جانے کے دن تھے، اور کیا میرے جمالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے،
کیا میرے جوالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، کیا میرے جوالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے.
جیتی ہے وہ ماں جس کے گزر جانے کے دل تھے، جیتی ہے وہ ماں جس کے گزر جانے کے دل تھے،
کیا میرے جوالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، کیا میرے جوالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے.
تھی جو ہمارے گھر میں نشانی رسول کی، زینب ردا میں اپنی جسے پالتی رہی، اٹھ اٹھ کے جس کو چومتے رہے تھے رات بھر، ہے شبیر جی رہے تھے جسے دیکھ دیکھ کر، اس چہرے کے کیا خاک میں بھر جانے کے دن تھے،
کیا میرے جوالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، کیا میرے جوالال کے مر جانے کے دن تھے.
پیاسے کو مار کر بھی نہ ظالم نے دم لیا، سر اس کا میرے سامنے اس نے قلم کیا، آرام تھوڑی دیر بھی پایا نہ خاک پر، ہے پھر سے شروع ہو گیا اس لال کا سفر، بازار میں کب چاند سسر جانے کے دن تھے،
کیا میرے
جب جہاں میں پھپھی نے خوشی خوشی آزاد ایک کنیز تھی کی شیری نام کی، اور ساتھ ساتھ یہ بھی کہا تھا نا فکر کر، ہائے بارات لے کے آؤں گی اس کی میں تیرے گھر۔
پہنچا بہانا اس کے جدھر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے۔
لگ جائے نا نظر میرے یوسف جمال کو، دیکھا نظر نہ بھر کے کبھی اپنے لال کو، گیسوں میں خاک کوئی صاف تو کرو، ہے زینب کی میں کنیز ہوں انصاف تو کرو۔
برچھی کہاں دل میں اتر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے۔
نازک بدن پہ زخم نہ آنے دیا کبھی، میں نے نہ اس کو دھوپ میں جانے دیا کبھی، نیزے پہ سر ہے آج بدن جلتی ریت پر، ہائے پردیس میں یہ آنکھ نہیں تھی مجھے خبر،
محنت کی کمائی یوں بکھر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے۔
وعدہ کیا تھا سر پہ جو صحرا سجاؤں گا، گھبرانا صغرا میں تجھے لینے کو آؤں گا، دہلیز پر ہے بیٹھی تکلم تو غم گسار، اور 6 ماہ سے ہے اس کو برادر کا انتظار،
پردیس سے یہ لوٹ کے گھر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان کے مر جانے کے دن تھے، جوان اکبر، جوان اکبر،
شام کا بازار عابد بیمار،
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 پاؤں میں بیڑی توق گرابا،
شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار،
بھولے گا نہ وہ منظر نیزے پہ سرے سرور،
بھولے گا نہ وہ منظر نیزے پہ سرے سرور،
بے مقلا بے چادر بلوے میں پھوپھی مادر اور مجمع کفار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
بازار کی زیبائی کوٹھوں پہ تماشائی،
بازار کی زیبائی کوٹھوں پہ تماشائی،
آدھا کی سفارہ اور عالم تنہائی، وہ بے کس و لاچار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
دربار میں سروریاں آتے ہیں حرم گریاں،
دربار میں سروریاں آتے ہیں حرم گریاں،
اٹھنے لگا ایک طوفان محشر کا سہے سامان، جنبش میں ہے دربار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
وہ پائی تو گھبرا کر بچی نے کہا رو کر،
آئی تو گھبرا کر بچی نے کہا رو کر،
اس دشت میں ہے جو سر وہ تو ہے سر سرور، کیسے کروں دیدار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
حاکم نے یہ سن پایا تو اور ستم ڈھایا،
نے یہ سن پایا تو اور ستم ڈھایا،
سرپوش کو سرکایا اور بچی کو دکھلایا، چلائی وہ ایک بار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
کچھ شمر سے فرما دو گردن میری کھلوا دو،
شمر سے فرما دو گردن میری کھلوا دو،
سر بابا کا دلوا دو، یا اس کو یہ سمجھا دو مارے نہ ستمگار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
سر جا کے اٹھاؤں میں یا پاس بلاؤں میں،
سر جا کے اٹھاؤں میں یا پاس بلاؤں میں،
رودا سناؤں میں سینے سے لگاؤں میں، دیکھے بھرا دربار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
کہنے لگی پھر رو کر پیاری ہے اگر دختر،
کہنے لگی پھر رو کر پیاری ہے اگر دختر،
آ جائیے ہاتھوں پر سب دیکھ لے یہ منظر، الفت کا ہو اظہار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
دختر کی صدا سن کر پھر تشت تلا سے سر،
دختر کی صدا سن کر پھر تشت تلا سے سر،
گودی میں گیا اٹھ کر نادان نے لپٹا کر، سر پر رکھے رخسار
عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم کا بازار، عابد بیگم
کعبہ کا سر پایا دل بچی کا بھر آیا
کعبہ کا سر پایا دل بچی کا بھر آیا
ہر ظلم کو دہرایا لوگوں نے جو سن پایا آنکھیں ہوئی خوبار
عابد بیگم کا بازار عابد بیگم کا بازار عابد بیگم
زندہ میں انی سے غم کرتے ہیں حرم آتا
میں انی سے غم کرتے ہیں حرم ماتا
ماں پوچھتی ہے پیغام کیوں آنکھ ہے یہ پرنا کیا مر گئی دلدار
عابد بیگم کا بازار عابد بیگم کا بازار عابد بیگم
پاؤں میں بیڑے توک گراما
کا بازار عابد بیگم کا بازار عابد بیگم شام کا بازار عابد بیگم میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں
جب قید ہوا سید والا کا دلارا کوئی بھی نہ تھا بنتا جو بے کس کا سہارا بابا کو بسد پاس کئی بار پکارا شبیر کا سر پر سر نہیں نظر آیا یہ دیکھ کے بیمار کے منہ کو جگر آیا
میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں
جلتے ہوئے خیموں کا سما دیکھ رہا تھا ہر سمت فضاؤں میں دھواں دیکھ رہا تھا سوکھے ہوئے ہونٹوں کی فغاں دیکھ رہا تھا بے گور کفن کہہ کے ادھر لاش پڑی تھی اور بے غسنا لے کے ادھر فوج کھڑی تھی
میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں میرا بیمار ماں ہائے سجاد ماں
بے پردگی زینب کلثوم پہ رویا عباس پہ اور سید مظلوم پہ رویا
نادي علي المظهر العجائب تجده عونا لك في النوائب تجده عونا لك في النوائب كل هم وغم سينجلي بولايتك يا علي يا علي. يا رب العالمين 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 يا رب العالمين
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العلي العظيم.
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. چند مصائب کے کلمات مظلوم کربلا امام حسین علیہ السلام کے حوالے سے پیش کرنا چاہتا ہوں. ہائے حسین ہائے اصغر ہائے حسین ہائے اصغر اور ایک سوکھا سا سرور کا گلا ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا. دیکھیے بی بی زہرا کی فریاد اپنے لال مولا حسین علیہ السلام کے ساتھ اپنے پوتے جناب علی اصغر کے گلے کی بھی مصائب کے بند دیکھیے کہ ایک سوکھا سا سرور کا گلا ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا. اور ایک ماں کی تھی مقتل میں صدا ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا. سوکھا سا سرور کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا، ارے ہر سمت ستم کی بارش میں روتی ہوئی ایک ماتن تھی، ارے خنجر کے تلے بھی زہرا تھی، اور تیر کی زد پہ بھی زہرا تھی، ارے ہے زہرا نے بھی دیکھ لیا ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا سرور کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا، ارے 6 ماہ سے بچے کے اوپر یہ ارض و سما بھی روتا رہا، ہر ایک کند سخجر سرور کے سوکھے سے گلے پر چلتا رہا، ارے پامال ہوا بے جرم و خطا، ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا سرور کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا۔ یہاں دیکھیے بی بی زہرا کی مصیبت، ارے مقتل کی زمین کو صاف کیا، ارے ایک ماں نے پریشان بالوں سے، ارے مقتل کی زمین کو صاف کیا، ایک ماں نے پریشان بالوں سے، ارے ایک ماں نے سوارا اصغر کی زلفوں کو بڑے ارمانوں سے، ارے دل دیکھ کے دونوں کا ٹوٹا، ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا سرور کا گلا، ایک سوکھا سا اصغر کا گلا۔
حسین یا حسین،
صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا مظلوم يا غريب كربلاء يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا من خزائن علومك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and my sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When it comes to the Shi'i identity, the tragedy of Karbala takes center stage. And because of this, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam became a slogan, became the face of the path of the Ahlul Bayt, the symbol. In doing this, we usually overshadow the role of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam in the life of Abu Abdullah, in the life of his father, and in the life of his grandfather. Not only this, but some of us begin to question that how come Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam went for peace when Imam al-Hussein went to war? How come, we ask, if they are one light, based on one principle, then why did they act differently? Or we could ask that if Imam al-Hasan was in the position of Imam al-Hussein, would he have done the same thing? Because to answer the question about why they acted differently is quite straightforward and simple. When you look at the geopolitics of the time, they were in completely different political situations. The better question to ask would be, would Imam al-Hasan have done the same in the situation that Imam al-Hussein found himself in? And so what I wanted to do in this program, in this lecture, was go through a quick recap of the background of the story of Karbala from the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through looking at the different tribes and then coming down to look at the relationship between Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein. So we begin by looking at the tribe of Quraysh. Any of you who have watched my lectures on the history of the Arabian Peninsula will know that it is impossible to understand the tragedy of Karbala and impossible to understand anything that happened in Islamic history from Saqifa to what happened to Imam Ali, to Imam al-Hasan, to Imam al-Hussein without understanding Quraysh. Quraysh were the tribe of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were the tribe, they were the descendants of Ismail, and they believed that they were the chosen ones. They believed they were the people of God. And so Quraysh, they were the royalty of the Arabian tribes. And this is the tribe that Rasulullah was born into, that Imam Ali was born into. But they were not Qurayshi minded. The Qurayshis, the reason why when Rasulullah passes away and the people stand against Imam Ali alayhi salam is because he was not Qurayshi minded. You look at his companions, they were all slaves. Ammar, slave. Miqdad, slave. Salman, slave. Previous slaves. What the Qurayshis wanted were those leaders who would favor Quraysh, who understood this religion, Islam, as Quraysh's religion. Why? We go back, we look at the family tree. We see that the great-great-grandfather of Rasulullah, his name was Qusay. Some say he was a wasi, some have the opinion that he was even a prophet. Qusay was a great man who had sons. These sons, one of them, his name was Abd Manaf. Now, here is where the family tree begins to split. Abd Manaf has a son named Hashim and a son named Abd Shams. Hashim then has a son named Abdul Muttalib. And Abdul Muttalib, of course we know his son Abdullah and Abu Talib. Abdullah has Rasulullah and Abu Talib has Imam Ali alayhi salam. We go back up to Hashim's brother Abd Shams. His first son, his name is Umayyah. And then you understand the distinction between Bani Hashim and Bani Umayyah. Bani Hashim, here was the split. Bani Hashim, they come from the same family tree from Abd Munaf. So Abd Munaf, his descendants were seen as great. His descendants split into Hashim, Abd Shams, then Umayyah. So you have Bani Hashim and Bani Umayyah. From Bani Hashim, you have Abdul Muttalib, Abu Talib, Abdullah, and then you have their sons, the Prophet, and you have Imam Ali alayhi salam. From Umayyah's son, Harb, has Abu Sufyan. So then there's Umayyah, Harb, Abu Sufyan. So Abu Sufyan is from the same family tree as Prophet Muhammad. So he is his cousin, distant cousin. And if you look to Abu Sufyan's son Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, he is the cousin of Imam Ali. And then you look at the son of Muawiyah, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and he is the cousin of Imam al-Hussein. So these are cousins, Bani Umayyah and Bani Hashim. And even though the Quran descended onto Rasulullah, and this was not a revelation of nepotism, Bani Umayyah, they wanted this to be the religion of Quraysh, and they are from the descendants of Abd Manaf. So this revelation, whatever it was for them, was supposed to be shared. It wasn't supposed to be taken by Banu Hashim. Of course, the Banu Hashim don't see it as this being for Banu Hashim. They see it as what is the divine right, what is the wilayah, who is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for this leadership. But on the other side, Bani Umayyah, they wanted that leadership for themselves. And you find it from the very beginning. Even before they accepted Islam, when Abu Sufyan was in his first battle against Rasulullah in Badr, of course Abu Sufyan was not present, but his father-in-law was present, the father of Hind, and his brother-in-law, the brother of Hind. They were present in Badr. They fought against the Muslims, and Imam Ali alayhi salam killed the father-in-law of Abu Sufyan. He killed Hind's father. And Imam Ali killed Hind's brother. That's why Hind, when she was going to Uhud, she took her slave Wahshi and she said, I want three. I want Rasulullah, I want Muhammad, or I want Ali, or I want Hamza. Okay, these were the main characters of the Muslims. Hamza, because he is the son of Abdul Muttalib. Ali is a son of Abu Talib, and Ali is the one who killed her father. He killed her brother. He killed Abu Sufyan's father-in-law and brother-in-law. That means he killed Muawiyah's uncle and Muawiyah's grandfather. You see, there's a notion of revenge all throughout this Islamic history. The Bani Umayyah wanted revenge, and they wanted the Islamic revelation for themselves so they can rule through it. That's why you find that when Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam is marched into the palace of Yazid in Sham, and Yazid sits on his throne and stares down at Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, and he pokes his stick at the lips of Imam al-Hussein, he says, I wish my grandfathers in Badr can come and see this day. Allahu Akbar. Do you know what that means? That means he was seeking revenge for what had happened in Badr. Karbala for him was vengeance for his grandfather who was killed by Ali. That's why in the battlefield, Imam Hussein would say, don't you know who I am? I am the son of Fatima. Don't you know who my father is? They say, we know who your father is. That's why we want to kill you. We know who your father is. They had hatred towards Imam Ali alayhi salam. This is what breaks the heart, that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was part was still part of the beginning of that Islamic revelation. All the actions that his grandfather Rasulullah had taken, Imam al-Hussein was part of it. And now he was paying the price for all the victories of his grandfather. He was the one who would pay the price for the victories of Rasulullah. So we come now to Rasulullah. He receives the revelation. The Bani Umayyah, they outcasted. Of course, in the Fatah of Mecca, Abu Sufyan becomes a Muslim, by name. And they are around there. They're trying to get their best positions in the Islamic empire. Rasulullah has his sons. Of course, they are the sons of his daughter, but he calls them his sons. Never once does he refer to them as anything else but his abna. He has both Al-Hasan wal-Hussein. Imam Ali alayhi salam would not name them before handing them over to Rasulullah. These princes, his heirs. Rasulullah would take them, he would name them. And he would name them based on what Jibreel would tell him. And Rasulullah, he was inseparable from his grandchildren. And he would call them his sons. And this might sound normal to us, to you and I. In our societies right now, in our cultures, it's not unusual for a grandfather to call his grandchildren his sons. But in that time, your sons were only your actual sons. The sons from your daughter were not considered your sons. The daughter was not the one who was considered to carry on the lineage or legacy of a man. What Prophet Muhammad did at that time, after he was mocked because he couldn't have young sons, the only sons that he would have, they passed away in their childhood. So he was mocked for that, but he called Al-Hasan wal-Hussein his sons. He raised them himself. He was not calling them his sons by his actions and his speech simply to show that the society right now was wrong to say that the lineage could not be passed down through a woman. Of course, that was part of it. That's the first point. That Rasulullah, through his actions and speech, showed this. That the lineage could be passed down through a woman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the life of Rasulullah, changed the culture of the Arabs through this. But also, Rasulullah calling them his sons was to show his spiritual connection to them that was above blood, that they were the heirs to his teachings, to his knowledge, to his leadership. They were the heirs. He would raise them, spiritual connection before the blood connection. They were his sons. Even when he came to take Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, the first time he held him, he said, Had-tibni, give me my son. This was not a random event. Rasulullah does not speak randomly. He was showing that the connection with these young boys was one of a spiritual connection. And he raised them the same way, preparing them for what was to come, because they were both going to play defining roles in what was to transpire. Now we come to their father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and how history reads the actions of Ali ibn Abi Talib. We see the historians, their opinions towards Imam Ali alayhi salam, how the scholars, not from the Ahlul Bayt, who would say about Imam Ali that he was someone who was very stubborn. He was not very pragmatic. Okay, he's a Khalifa, he's one of the Khulafa, the fourth. But he was one who was not pragmatic, not flexible. He would go to war, even with Muslims themselves, and sacrifice tens and hundreds and thousands of lives in order to prove a point. He would never take a shortcut. No easy ways. He would always do the right thing, or what he believed to be the right thing. And he was stubborn, they say. He was not flexible, not pragmatic. For this reason, the other Khulafa were greater than him, because they knew how to be politically correct. And it goes back to what I mentioned previously about Abu Sufyan, when he came to Imam Ali in Saqifa, you remember? And he said to him, how can they take the Khilafah when it is for the sons of Abd Munaf, you and I? You see how he understands religion. And Imam Ali says, إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُنَافِقٌ. No, you're a hypocrite. Why? Because it's not about Abd Munaf, ya Abu Sufyan. I'm from Banu Hashim, Ya Abu Sufyan. If I wanted to do this based on tribal contacts, I can do this. I'm from Banu Hashim, I can do it without you. But I'm not going to do that because it's not tribal. Because if I use you now as an ally and you understand this religion tribally, and then later on you lay claim to the leadership, then Imam Ali would have lost. He didn't. Of course, we believe Imam Ali to be principled. We don't believe him to be stubborn and not pragmatic. Principled, because he was protecting the divine right and the wilayah. Well, I am the imam whether you like it or not. He has to protect the imamah. Now he is sahib al-ta'wil. He's the one now who has to discern falsehood from truth. He has to explain the religion to the people. Rasulullah was sahib al-tanzil. He was bringing everyone together. Imam Ali is sahib al-ta'wil. But then they say the other khulafa are greater. Why? Because they were pragmatic. They were flexible. The first khalifa, he knew who to speak to, what to say, how to be in such a way that he wouldn't create strife. Imam Ali is Khalifa for 5 years and it's all out war. Muslims versus Muslims. As well with the second Khalifa, they say the same thing. He knew how to be politically correct. He knew how to bring people together. He knew how to make the Muslims victorious against the non-Muslims. With Uthman, they say there's a difference of opinion. He's either the same as Ali or some would say he's better. But Ali, no, he's not pragmatic. That's why when Imam Ali was Khalifa, you had many people who followed Muawiyah. And then you see Egypt and you see Syria split from the Islamic Empire. Yes, Imam Ali had many followers, but some followed Muawiyah. So they say it's because Imam Ali alayhi salam was not a good leader because of his way, always ready for battle. However, they say Imam al-Hasan, he was someone who was pragmatic. He was flexible. Where Imam Ali alayhi salam was unwilling, Imam al-Hasan was willing. Where Imam Ali would go to battle, Imam Hassan would not like to go to battle. And so they say that Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam was different to his father. He was different in all these ways from his father. And they even have narrations that say Imam Ali alayhi salam said that me and my son Hussein, we are loyal to the people of Kufa, but my son Hassan, he has his own way. They isolate Imam al-Hasan. Then we see after Imam al-Hasan passes away, we move on to Imam al-Hussein, and then we see a return back to the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib. How Imam al-Hussein comes and he is unpragmatic, just like his father. He is seeking martyrdom for the sake of making a point. He is rebellious and he is stubborn and he is not pragmatic and not flexible. If he had just obeyed Yazid, then we would avoid the tragedy of Karbala. They see Ali and Hussein are the same, and Hassan is different. And we see in this reading of history an inconsistency. How is it that Al-Hasan is different from Ali and Hussein? What is it that unites these three personalities according to this reading of history? Because now we ask a question, according to the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, are they not one Nur? Are we not taught that the Imams are all mirrors of Rasulullah? Then how can they disagree? Don't we go by the narration, أولنا محمد وأوسطنا محمد وآخرنا محمد وكلنا محمد? That the first of us is Muhammad, the last of us is Muhammad, and all of us are Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That they are all one Nur. They lead by one principle. They act in one way. That if you were to have them all in a room, all the Imams at the same time, they would never disagree. In any action, they would all take the same action. So how can we bring this inconsistency into an understanding by which it makes sense to us? You see, we have a different reading of history. We also have a different theological structure. We believe, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt believe that all the Imams are a mirror of Rasulullah. So whatever they teach me is a teaching of Rasulullah. We see that if Imam Rida alayhi salam advised me a hukum, that hukum is as if Rasulullah said it himself. That's how we know our fiqh. And that's why we did not have to go towards fields of knowledge like the principles of jurisprudence, usul. Why? Because we didn't need it in the time of the infallibles. When we had 200 to 300 years of a ma'soom alive, we didn't need usul to discern what the ahkam should be. Whereas the other schools of thought, they needed that. So they had the different schools and madhahib, and they had the different ways to find their fiqhi answers. So we started our usul late because we had the infallible who was available to us to teach us this. We take our ahkam and we take our laws, we take our advice, we take our teachings from the Ahlul Bayt. But this causes a problem for us if you tell us that the Ahlul Bayt are different to each other in a way that they would act differently. So if Imam al-Hasan was in a situation that Imam al-Hussein found himself in Karbala, Imam al-Hasan, you're saying he would have surrendered? You see, when it comes to different readings of history, and again, if you have seen my courses, then you would know this. It's always the first lecture that I give is about understanding different readings of history, how there is no one objective narrative that anyone can claim is the 100% true history and everything else is subjective. No. Even when it comes to Tarikh al-Tabari, that book, that resource that everyone uses when they're analyzing history, you see in that book, al-Tabari, he emits certain stories and facts that contradict his theology, because by the way, he was a theologian, not a historian, but we'll leave that discussion for another day. And I remember when I was learning this, and I went to my teacher, my history teacher, and I said to him, Shaykhna, when you write your history, I read it, and you're writing in the perspective of a Shi'i. And he goes, yes, I am. And I'm like, well, is that right? He says, well, Habibi, there is no other way. Whatever position you're writing from, it has to be a position that you can justify. There is no default position. There is no objective position. There is a narrative that you must bring, but it's not he said, she said, literally me versus you. No, don't misunderstand me. You must bring forward facts and evidence and hints throughout history which you analyze so that you can discern truth from falsehood, and you can bring a credible hypothesis of what transpired in history based on facts. So you bring evidence and then we can discuss. The khalfiyya, the background that someone is coming from, the worldview, changes the reading of history. That's why someone who is, if I told someone that the Quran predicted that the Romans were going to defeat the Persians after they had been defeated by them, then someone who believes that the Quran is a miracle, he would see this as a prophecy. But someone who does not believe the Quran to be a miracle, he would see this as some sort of trick written on a piece of paper later on perhaps. He will find ways out of it to describe it that this is not simply a miracle from God, but this is perhaps someone had written it afterwards and it was copied or it was given to people at a later date and we don't know about the different situations that had occurred. Whatever you want to call it, whatever explanation that people might come out with. What I'm trying to get to is that based on the worldview, based on, for example, this person believing in the Quran being a miracle or not, they would come to different conclusions because they have a different khalfiyya. Of course, facts are there, so you can see if one is a credible answer and one isn't. The facts are there. But there's a way to interpret these facts. It's not simply just looking at them and then bringing it out and saying, look, here you go. There is a whole history that you must make consistent, make a narrative. And this is fine, this is okay. This is what historians, and this is what tahqiq is for. And this is how we go through hundreds of contradictory narrations. Now, when it comes to the facts that we want to use for our issue with Imam al-Hasan and the inconsistency in his personality when we compare it to that of his father and his brother, then we're going to look at two main facts. And then from there, we'll bring forward our hypothesis. The first fact is that Imam Ali alayhi salam, someone who we can agree was principled, whether he was principled or stubborn, put them aside, we can agree he would always do the right thing, right? He always did what he believed to be 100% true. And he would not do anything which he felt would compromise that. We all agree upon that. Now, we say that it was principled. They might say that it was because he was uncompromising or not flexible. Fine. Put that aside. But we both agree he would do what he believed was 100% right. So, one has to ask the question, why was Imam Ali alayhi salam so certain in passing the leadership down to Imam al-Hasan? If he saw Imam al-Hasan as so different to himself, as someone who was not who was compromising, who feared battle, who was flexible to the point that he was politically correct even at the expense of principles, then would Imam Ali, this principled person that we say he's so principled, we say that he's so stubborn, we say that he's so non-pragmatic, unpragmatic, would he pass it on to Imam al-Hasan? Not only that, but we see how much he loved Imam al-Hasan. We see how much trust he had in Imam al-Hasan. So much so that in one of the letters that he writes to his son, because he was so close to Imam al-Hasan, you can see their closeness. In this letter, when he says to him, وَجَدْتُكَ بَعْضِي بَلْ وَجَدْتُكَ كُلِّي كَأَنَّمَا أَصَابَكَ أَصَابَنِي. He says that I have found you to be a part of me. No, you are all of me. It's as if whatever happens to you, happens to me. This is the most love one can express to another, where you say, you're me, you're part of me. And you see the Ahlul Bayt, this is how they express their maximum love. When Rasulullah says, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn, or he says, Fatima bid'atun minni, right? He says, I am from Husayn, Husayn is from me, Fatima is a part of me. Imam Ali says to Imam al-Hasan, you are me. Whatever happens to you, happens to me. This person that we know as Ali ibn Abi Talib, that you're saying would never budge, why would he want to give the leadership to someone like the Hasan that you describe? Not only that, but then his brother, who was also not pragmatic, who was also not flexible, who also sought battle and rebellion, how come Imam al-Hussein, not once does he try to fight for the leadership? Not once does he say, I am the true heir. Not once does he say, Father, how could you give it to him? There's not one scholar that suggests that Imam Ali passed it down and there was a battle between Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein. Never. In fact, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam went to Kufa with Imam al-Hasan. When he went to do the treaty with Muawiyah, he went back to Kufa with Imam al-Hasan. Imam al-Hussein never went against Imam al-Hasan. In fact, Imam al-Hussein was an obedient follower of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. And that's hard for someone to say, isn't it? That Imam Hussein was an obedient follower. Yes, he was, of his Imam. Imam al-Hasan was Hussein's Imam. He was Hussein's leader. Allahu Akbar, the leader of Abu Abdullah. How can the leader of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam be wronging the people and wronging Islam and Abu Abdullah stay quiet? Is that the personality of Abu Abdullah? The one who stands in the face of Yazid and is ready for Karbala, he's going to let it go because that's his brother? So then you have someone like Ali ibn Abi Talib and you have someone like Hussein ibn Ali, and both of them are agreeing on the leadership of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Imam Ali comes and on his deathbed he says, he passes on the leadership to Imam al-Hasan. He says, I am obliged to pass on the wilayah now. The torch is being passed on to Al-Hasan, and Al-Hasan is obliged to pass it on to Hussein afterwards. The second fact that one must consider is that if you really want to know what Imam Ali alayhi salam's position was in Saqifa, then you see it here. Here we know, Ya Ali, should there have been a council? How is the leadership of Islam passed on? You see, in how his actions spoke louder than his words on his deathbed. There is no contradiction. There is no he said, she said. There is no chaos at the death of Imam Ali. Everyone agrees that he passed on to Imam al-Hasan in peace. He gave it to him. He passed it on to him. There was no fight. This shows us the position of the Ahlul Bayt when it comes to leadership and how it is passed on. You see, the actions, they speak louder than words. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam receives it from his father in peace. And in the position that he was in with Muawiyah, then Imam Ali would have done the exact same thing. In the position that Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam was in with Muawiyah, then Imam al-Hussein would have done the exact same thing. And in Imam al-Hussein's position, had Imam al-Hasan been the one leading the troops in Karbala, then he would have done the same thing. And I mentioned, Yazid had gone too far. Muawiyah was in a place where one could still make a treaty whilst trying not to go to war at this current time and this political climate when the people now were all betraying the Ahlul Bayt. Just like Saqifa. Why did Imam Ali alayhi salam not go to war? He said, bring me 40, only 5 came. But when it got to Yazid, then the red line had been crossed. Islam itself now was perishing. Islam itself. When Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam was behind the door, Imam Ali still had to protect Islam. So he cannot go and begin killing everyone, especially if his life is at risk, because someone has to carry the message on right now. But in the time of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, there had been now many years between what happened in Saqifa and what's happening now in Karbala. There were much more people who knew the path of the Ahlul Bayt, even if it was by mind and tongue and not by heart. But it was there. The people knew about the blood of Abu Abdullah. When Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam chooses to sacrifice himself for this mission to revive Islam, and of course, initially his aim was to take out Yazid. But when plan A did not go forward, and then plan B was martyrdom, he sacrifices his blood to provoke the ummah. He does this because now Islam must be revived. Imam Ali would have done the same thing, and Imam al-Hasan would have done the same thing, because they all lead by one principle and one nur and one light between all of them. They are all Muhammad from beginning to end. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Sallallahu alayka ya Sayyidi wa ya Mawlai Ya Rasulallah. Sallallahu alayka ya Sayyidi wa ya Mawlai Ya Aba Abdullah. Peace be upon the dry lips of Hussein. Peace be upon the dry throat of Hussein. Peace be upon the grey beard drenched in blood, as the dust settled on the 10th of Muharram, on the day of Ashura. The bodies lay lifeless on the ground, the heads taken from their bodies. The head of Imam al-Hussein is placed on a spear. As they gathered the women and children and tied their wrists, forced to look upon the faces of their beloveds, forced to look upon their blood dripping as they walked. As Zainab walked at the end of the line, the tribe of Bani Asad came to Karbala, and they went to take the wife of Habib ibn Mudahir. Oh lady, you are from our tribe. They cannot take you without it being a disgrace for us. You must come with us now. She said to them, I cannot leave. How can I leave when the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib remains alone, without a tribe, without any guardians, without any backbones, without any protection? I am not better than Zainab. They told the lady, we will not be disgraced. You must come with us. She looked upon Zainab. Zainab looked at her and said, go. Go with your tribe. As she looked down and remembered the flag of Abu Fadl as it waved high above her head. When she came to Karbala, it was Abbas that held her onto the camel. And now as she leaves Karbala, her Abbas is mutilated on the ground with no arms. And she is being marched out and whipped. As the night time came, and they sat to rest, Zainab almost sees a figure approaching her. As it's coming closer, the figure comes closer, she realizes it's a man. As he approaches, she gets herself ready and she says, oh man, whoever you are, don't come any closer. I am the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Don't you dare try to harm me or the children. The man shows his face. He tells her, Zainab, it's me, Ali. She says, Baba, why have you come now? Why didn't you come when they cut off the arms of Abbas? Why didn't you come when they sat upon the chest of Hussein? Baba, why didn't you come when they whipped my back and slapped my face and took the earrings from your granddaughters, Ya Ali? They march your daughters through the streets, Ya Ali. Your sons' heads are upon spears, Ya Ali. If only you could see, Ya Ali, Ya Ali. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. ولعنة الله على الذين ظلموا إلى يوم القيامة.
हाय बाजार शाम मेरा बेकसिमा ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مان، یہ یہی بات سجاد کو کھا گئی، یہ یہی بات سجاد کو کھا گئی، سر کھلے ہائے زینب کہاں گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، توخ کے بوجھ سے سر نہیں تھا جھکا، توخ کے بوجھ سے سر نہیں تھا جھکا، بس شرمندگی ایک ہی درد تھا، بس شرمندگی ایک ہی درد تھا، مجمع اشکیاں میں پھوپھی آ گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، تپ رہا تھا بدن اور زنجیر بھی، تپ رہا تھا بدن اور زنجیر بھی، میری داما پھوپھی اور ہمشیر بھی، میری داما پھوپھی اور ہمشیر بھی، سوچتے تھے نہ کیوں کر خزاں گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، بیبیوں کے گلے ریسماں سے بندھے، بیبیوں کے گلے ریسماں سے بندھے، گرد آلود بالوں سے چہرے چھپے، گرد آلود بالوں سے چہرے چھپے، شام تک اس طرح بنت زہرا گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، وارثوں کے جنازوں پہ روئے نہیں، وارثوں کے جنازوں پہ روئے نہیں، عصر عاشور کے بعد سوئے نہیں، عصر عاشور کے بعد سوئے نہیں، نیند رخصت ہوئی آنکھ تترا گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ایک تو زندان اس پر اندھیرا بہت، ایک تو زندان اس پر اندھیرا بہت، اور فریاد کرنے پہ پہرا بہت، اور فریاد کرنے پہ پہرا بہت، موت بھی اس اندھیرے سے گھبرا گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ایک ہی بات سجاد کو کھا گئی، ایک ہی بات سجاد کو کھا گئی، سر کھلے ہائے زینب کہاں گئی، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام، ہائے بازار شام میرا بے کسی مام۔
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء، 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليكم يا أئمة البقيع ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله الآخر الأهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس وأختك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدي في يوم الجزاء. السلام عليك يا فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجا وسهل الله تعالى مخرجا وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته. سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع صلوات.
زینب تھی لو خبر عابد ہے نا تمام، بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان، اس کو بلائے بازار شام آ گیا، دشتے بلا کو چھوڑ کر آ کے شفا کو ہاتھ جوڑ کر ایسے چلے گی ماں اے میرے نوجوان، بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان، اس کو بلائے بازار شام آ گیا، قسمت کی پاس باں ہے وہ خیر النساء کی جاں ہے جو، غربت کی انتہا ہوئی غیروں کے درمیان ہے وہ، شہزادی یہ جنان سہتی ہے سختیاں، بازار شام آ گیا اکبر میرے جوان، سر سجاد کا ہے ہم سفر، تم تو نہیں ہے یہ ستم سہتا رہا ہے وہ مگر، ایسے سہے بھلا بیمار ساروں صدا کہتے ہیں شام میں سبھی، بدلہ علی کا لیں گے ہم بنتے علی سے آج ہی، پتھر سے ہے بھری لوگوں کی جھولیاں، محرموں کی بھیڑ میں اٹھتی نہیں نظر میری، عباس کی قسم نہیں اشنا نبی کا غم کوئی، دکھ ہے یہ میری جان سہمی ہے بیبیاں، جس نے عمر بھر اکبر تجھے حجاب میں، غازی کے سامنے بھی وہ بیٹا رہی نقاب میں، پیروں میں بیردا جاتی ہے علماء، سنا کو دیکھ کر یاور یہ کہہ رہی تھی ماں، دیکھ تو بھی نوجوان مادر کا